Ever since I was a child, I've always loved flying. Everything associated with aviation has just been fascinating to me. And I don't get to fly hardly very much. In fact, I can't tell you the last time I was in an airplane. But it's always been a love of mine, and I guess I get it naturally because on my dad's side of the family, there are several people who've been involved in the aviation industry, and some that are just private pilots. But mom, on the other hand, she's always hated to fly. She's just always had a strong dislike for it, and many of you may be in her camp where you don't like anything about flying. And I remember a story that Dad has told for years. It was Mama's first time to fly. My dad's family lives in California, a lot of his extended family. And so they were on a flight to go out there. And again, this is Mom's first time to fly. Well, when they took off, Mom didn't like that. She didn't like that takeoff where it throws you back in your seat and all that. But the plane had reached cruising altitude, and so everything had kind of calmed down, and she was doing a little bit better. All of a sudden, Dad said she grabbed his arm, and she said, "Honey, there's another plane that's fixing to crash into us." And so Dad whipped his head around to look out the window to see what it was, and he said, "Honey," he said, "that's our wing. That's our airplane wing. There isn't another airplane fixing to crash into us. That's our wing." But Mom was just still so tensed up because she didn't like to fly. But again, me on the other hand, I love it. I love everything about it. And so when I believe I was 19, I met a gentleman who was a pilot, and he agreed to take me up for a few flight lessons. An entry-level license for a pilot, it allows you to fly in VFR, or what's called visual flight rules. And so legally, you can fly when the sky's clear, but when the visibility gets low, then a private pilot that just has that visual flight rating, they have to land. They can't keep flying when visibility becomes so locked in or becomes so restricted. And it's for their safety, and a lot of people don't understand why that's so important. And I won't go into the specifics of this because this could take up a whole video, but for those of you that don't realize this, and again, I'll make this very brief, the human body is designed to its sense of balance based off of standing on something firm. In other words, something that doesn't move. And so when you take off in an aircraft, the moment those wheels leave the ground, the only way your body is interpreting up and down is through your eyesight. And to give you an example, there was a pilot that he was flying, and a bad storm system came up, and instead of landing, he thought, well, I'm good with this. I'll just keep flying, which again it was illegal for him to do this, but he decided he was going to go ahead and fly through this low visibility. And so as he's flying into these clouds, he sees his instrument that tells him, if the plane is level, if the wings are flying level. But when he looked out the window, he thought, okay, this instrument is not right. I can tell from the way I'm seeing in the clouds that I'm at the wrong angle. So he banked his plane, he banked the wings to a level where he thought he would be flying straight. And then the visibility changed again, and the sight picture out the window changed again. So he's adjusting his wings based off of what he's seeing. He's totally ignoring his instruments. And once he broke out of the clouds, and I know this is hard for some of you to understand that's never been in an airplane, when he broke out of the clouds, he was literally flying upside down. And if he hadn't been as high as he was when he broke through, and he was able to correct, because now we got the story that he told. But if he had been lower and not enough time to correct, he would have crashed. He would have been a dead man today. And so it demonstrates that little story demonstrates how important it is to be instrument rated. And you've probably already guessed by now, an instrument rating means that you can take off and begin to fly, and when a storm system approaches, or low visibility I should say, you're able to legally keep flying because you know how to handle yourself in a situation where you can't see a thing out your windows. With that, there's such a spiritual aspect to being instrument rated, and I'd like for us to read, if we could, in Hebrews I love this chapter. This is the faith chapter. Chapter 11, verse 1. It says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." And it says in verse 2, "For by it," meaning faith, "the elders obtained a good report." And Hebrews 11 is full of men and women that are listed here that, if I can put it this way for this devotion, they were instrument rated in God's eyes. You've got people that, I could go down the whole list. I love this chapter. By faith Abel, by faith Noah, by faith Abraham, by faith Sarah, by faith Moses, by faith Rahab. It lists so many men and women in this chapter that by faith did this and they did that. And I love how it says in verse 33, let me turn there, "Who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong." I love that. "Waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens." And these men and women weren't just written in here for us to have a casual read before we go to bed. These people are included in this chapter for our example. And the common theme here is faith. And what it's trying to tell us through this, these men and women encountered situations where they didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know what situations, how they were going to turn out. But they had a deeper experience in God that me and you can have, that allowed them to keep going in spite of what they couldn't see. Because how many can agree that a lot of times it's the unknown that can drive you crazy? And if we're not careful, it'll drag our emotions down more than about anything. Because a lot of times with the unknown, it's the worst that we imagine. It's always going to be the worst that happens with the unknown. But the beautiful thing about it is God is willing to teach us if we're willing to learn. If I would have went on in my schooling and my training to become an instrument rated pilot, I would have had somebody sitting right beside me. And in the case of me making a mistake, and in those few lessons that I did, those few flight lessons, I made plenty of mistakes. And when that would happen, my instructor was always sitting in another seat, and he would grab the yoke and he would always make the correction, because he knew I was willing to learn. If I wasn't willing to learn, this gentleman wasn't going to be willing to teach me. Taking that in the spiritual context, if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to say, "God, I need a deeper experience in you, because it seems like I'm always grounded. I'm always back on the ground when something becomes uncertain or when things become unknown to me. I feel like my spiritual experience goes to the bottom." Can I tell you, there is an instrument rating for us to obtain. God wants us to have it, and it allows us to keep flying in spite of what we can't see. It's not God's will for you to stay on the ground during times of adversity. There's too much to be done. And I think we can all agree, adversity is not going to quit. You can't expect to get up in the air and keep flying without adversity. It's going to meet you, friend. Until we get to heaven, we've got stormy weather that unfortunately we're going to have to fly through. There's times that we will feel overwhelmed in our journey, but there's nothing wrong with feeling overwhelmed, because in those times, God has promised that He would take care of us during those times, and He would take over. How many times have you felt that you've been so overwhelmed and all of a sudden you felt the presence of the Lord take over for you? It all revolves around the willingness to learn and say, "Lord, I want to go deeper. I want you to teach me how to have that instrument rating." So I hope this has been a blessing to you in your journey with the Lord, and God help us all to gain a deeper level of faith during these trying times. That's my prayer. I hope it's yours, and I'll certainly look forward to seeing you again next time for these devotions.